right, 24 minutes before 11 o'clock, 75 years ago, in 2 days from now, the world as we know it changed. Well, the world as we knew it changed. The world as we know it right now would be totally different if the events of 75 years ago didn't happen. In other words, the bombing of Pearl Harbor changed the world, and probably, as horrible as it was, changed the world for the better. And the reason it was for the better is because of people like the gentleman we're going to learn about right now, and his whole generation. Hale Bradt is on the phone. Hale is a Korean War veteran. He's an astrophysicist. He's retired from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's an historian, and he is the son of Wilber Bradt. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. And he's written a book about his father, and the letters and the journals, I guess, that maybe you would say, and he's going to correct everything I've said wrong. But Wilber's War is the name of the book. An American family's journey through World War II. It is a true story, and it sounds like he stumbled upon some letters just not too long ago. I think when he was 50, it said. When he was 50, I should say. Hale Bradt, good morning,
That
Hale.
was a long time ago.
Good morning, Hale. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and I'm glad to be talking to Florida up here in snowy, rainy Massachusetts.
Oh, no. Snowy is good. Snowy and rainy is not good. I wish I could be in the snow, but not the snow and rain mixture. I don't like that.
Yep, I'm coming down there.
Good. We'll welcome you.
So
Thank you.
I love this whole idea, and I hope we don't lose these kinds of things in the future. Hey, John, how you doing? In the future, I hope we don't lose this kind of thing because we're so busy. I mean, we're writing stuff on the internet now instead of on paper, and the fact that all of the information you have is because you found letters from your father, right?
Right, and I suppose somebody could find an old CD or something with letters from 50 years back, but they won't have the gadget to play it.
Right.
So
right,
yes,
right.
you're right. These durable records mean a lot.
So where did you find them? Let's start there.
Well, first, during the war. This is a story about my dad going through World War II. While he was off in the army, he wrote letters continuously, and I was 11, just turned 11. I turned 11 on Pearl Harbor Day.
You did? Wow.
So you can tell me happy birthday 2 years from now.
2 days from
now. 2 days from now, yeah. And then I just lost track of them. My mother had often said she burned them. He had committed suicide after the war, and she had had a baby by somebody else during the war. So there was a lot of painful stuff, and it was totally plausible that after 6 moves to 5 different states that she had lost track of those letters. But I was inspired on my 80th birthday, literally, in 1980.
Okay.
On my 50th birthday in 1980.
Okay.
My sister that had the uncertain parentage and I got in a discussion that led me to look for some of his letters, and what I found were about a dozen he wrote to me that my mother had collected at some time, and I started reading those, and those were so beautifully written. He was an educated guy, and so they were poetic, loving, fatherly, and just I realized it was a treasure trove if I could find more. So then I found, in fact, my mother, though she always denied it, still had a whole bunch. Relatives, his parents' letters survived. They were at a nephew's house, a cousin's house. And so I ended up with like 700 of his letters, so I could track his whole story through the Pacific through them.
Wow.
So were you able to better understand why he eventually committed suicide?
I think so. I mean, there was the problem of my mother having this baby by somebody else, and it's not clear how much he knew because the whole thing was kept very secret. I didn't know the story until I really finished this work, the true story.
Mm-hmm.
there was that, but he'd also been through 3 phases of combat in the Pacific. A 500-pound bomb had landed 10 feet from him and put a piece of shrapnel in his eyebrow. He never stopped. He had to order people to places where that weren't safe, and he lost some junior officers, forward observers that he really thought a lot of, and was writing about them 2 years later. So I could see what plus close friends. He ran into close friends from other states that were killed within 100 yards of him, pre-war friends. And then the day he shot himself in the heart, he was having malarial symptoms, and things were tense between him and Mother. So I still don't know the whole story.
Where
well,
was?
I think I know it now. Go ahead.
Well, where was he when he killed himself?
He had just come home. He was an artillery battalion commander out in the Pacific. And then he was transferred to the infantry, and he was going to lead the Green Mountain Boys of Vermont, 172nd Infantry Regiment, into the shores of Japan when the war was over. And he was only home he was back in the country maybe 2-3 months, but he was home only 6 weeks when he did this. So it was right after the war.
So you were, by then, let's say you would have been about 15 or so, right?
December 1st, it's almost the anniversary. Yeah, I was going to turn 15 in 6 more days.
Okay.
So it was this time in 1945.
So was he home with you, or I'm trying to figure out
Yep.
how did you find out about his death?
Well, he was home with us.
Oh, okay.
He was still an Army officer. He was still stationed at Fort Meade. We were in Washington D.C. at that time, and he was an outpatient at the Fort Meade Hospital for seemingly minor things. And it was pretty clear in retrospect, I didn't see it then, that he was depressed. He didn't want to go back to the University of Maine, and he had these battles and disappointments and stuff behind him. So he was visiting. Fort Meade is 40 miles outside Washington, and we didn't have a car then, so he would come home on weekends. And this was one of those weekends. He was home. I was downtown with my sister and at lessons, and Mother was home when it happened.
So at 50 years old, you discover these letters, and I'm just curious, did you discover your father? Did you not know the man that you discovered in those letters until then?
Well, I thought I knew him because all through the war, his letters he wrote continuously every other day, His letters were always coming in, and when he was in the service before he went overseas, we saw him occasionally. And I remember him well from before the war, so I felt I knew him, but of course I know him much better now.
Yeah, I would think so. And I don't know if this is going to seem like a weird question, but do you see yourself? Like, you know how we pass things on to our children without even knowing it, especially the fact that you have the Korean War under your belt. You have the military experience as well. So did that help you better understand what he went through in World War II?
That you're asking good questions, and they're not easy to answer. I was never shot at in the Korean War. I was on a Navy cargo ship, so I had quite a different experience.
Okay.
But I was in Japan, where he went right after the peace was declared for only a couple of weeks, and I visited the Solomon Islands and Philippines and New Zealand to track out where he'd been. So through all that, and of course through what he wrote, I really got to know him. And sometimes I put myself in his shoes. I could say, well, how would I have done that or
Sure.
reacted to that?
Yeah.
And also traveling in your dad's footsteps over there, you probably had more of a handle on the two different cultures that were embroiled in World War II.
Right, because interestingly, I was the science I did. Actually, two of my very important mentors after I got my doctorate were Japanese.
Oh.
And in the Navy, I went. That was like in the '60s and '70s, but in the Navy, I went. Well, as I went to Japan too. My ship went back and forth to Japan, so I had those connections, and it was very interesting going there with that history the first time. It was.
I'm looking
But
at.
they're one.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But they're wonderful people. Well, I'll just tell you this one vignette. When my ship was going to Japan for the very first time, this is 1953. I felt very strange about going to this country. They'd killed my dad and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
But I had a little shortwave radio, and I turned it on at one point. And by the way, I love classical music, always have. I get this Japanese station, and what I hear is Beethoven.
Right.
And then I hear the first notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And I said, "Oh, we're 1,000 miles away from Japan still." And I'm saying, "Oh my God, it's welcoming me to Japan."
I see. Did you live in New York for a while?
Yeah, my mother and dad agreed that she should improve her piano. She was a concert pianist.
Okay.
Never made it big, had written a novel that never got published, that she should go to New York City and improve her skills in case he didn't come back.
Okay.
We were in Maine when he went in the Army. He went in with the Maine National Guard. So she took us to New York City and studied with a prominent pianist. And it was there, but sometime later, after my dad went overseas, that she found herself pregnant by this family friend. So we lived in New York City for about 2 years.
Okay.
And then when she became pregnant, she went off putatively to do war work somewhere and put us in boarding school. It was all very mysterious. And of course, now we know she was pregnant and having a baby.
So this is just a side note question, but you studied violin, correct?
Oh, good. How did you know that?
Well, you wrote it in the book. It's in your book.
And I'm sitting right outside my violin teacher house right now because I had a lesson from 9:30 to 10:30 in this interview. So I'm sitting in my car,
Really?
with the violin beside me.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So the music is. I mean, you mentioned the Beethoven's Fifth kind of made you feel something that you didn't feel just by listening to the talk. So the music is a part of your family, part of you, and part of your family. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And you still,
Wilber never played. My dad never played anything, but he loved opera and classical music.
Okay.
Since we are paying so much attention now to the servicemen that are returning home from serving overseas, and PTSD is like in the forefront, do you think if there was any kind of an awareness of that back then, that your dad would not have committed suicide?
Wow.
I'm not sure what we know now is helping, really. I don't really know the statistics.
Oh.
The one thing I do know is that I have this. My dad thought he was tough. My sister remembers before the war that my dad, Wilber, would capture a fly in the house, and he would catch it in his hand and go to the door and open the door and let the fly out.
Oh wow.
He didn't kill. He didn't kill people. He didn't kill things. But then you see him in the letters occasionally, and it's interesting. Most often to my his daughter, 11-year-old daughter, he would admit things like, whether we saw a bunch of Japs out beside the woods, they ran into the woods, and we put the artillery on them. No, goodbye, Japs.
My.
He obviously had hardened himself
Yeah.
to what he was doing, and so that's there. And so, it's not obvious, but he thought he was a tough guy. It's family hearsay, and I think I remember that he said he had enough willpower to shoot whoever shot him before he died.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom's
and what people
I'm sorry.
And what nobody ever told him, which they should have told him, is coming home will be the hardest part of the battle. Get ready to fight it. It ain't going to be easy.
See, I think that's what Robin was referring to with the PTSD question.
Yep.
So that's why you called
maybe it would have helped. Maybe it would have helped, but who knows?
Well, it's an interesting title, Wilber's War, because I think that right there is probably why you called it that. Am I right?
Well,
yeah. Norma, is your mom's name Norma?
But great alliteration, and it was his war. But I really could write a book, only I don't have letters to back it up. Norma's War. My mother's story, which is dramatic and heroic in her own right.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure.
Despite the problems.
Oh, sure. And you have to forgive her for having a relationship. It's just the way that life must have been. It must have been uncertain. It was hard. She was a beautiful woman. I'm looking at her picture right now that you put in the book. And my gosh, I'm sure that you have had your moments where you didn't know who to forgive and who not to forgive. But at this point, I'm sure it's all clear in your head.
Oh yeah. She was a very religious woman, and this whole thing tortured her till the day she died. In a way, she's heroic. I can't believe they decided to continue. They, meaning, I don't know how much it was her decision. It was mostly hers, probably, or the father's, who was this newspaper man. His story is quite interesting, but we won't get it. He was quite a well-known and interesting guy. But her story of keeping the baby, caring for it, giving it up, actually, trying to get... moved us back to Bangor, Maine, left the baby with the father, and then couldn't take it and moved us back to Washington where the baby was, where I met this 2-year-old whose provenance was a lie. Some other woman. This guy had another wife that had come and gone.
Oh, really?
And that kid was around when Wilber came home. And I've always assumed he bought the story. But now that I think about it, it's impossible. He must have known. But it was never discussed in the family in those 6 weeks. I never heard about it.
So you don't have
as being an issue.
So you don't have a relationship. He would be your half brother,
half sister. The baby that was born was a girl.
Sister. Okay. Well, all right. I'm a little confused there. Okay. All right. So do you have a relationship with her?
This is giving the whole story away, but fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
My mother, after the war, my mother, and then they had another child. So I basically have two half sisters,
I gotcha, okay.
Plus the sister I grew up with, and we all grew up together. Well, the youngest one was 20 years, but it's an interesting dynamic because the youngest one is not speaking to me because I wrote this and.
Why?
Told her mother's, because I told her mother's story.
Oh, okay. Well,
and that was just
too
much for her.
So
the other sister, the sister born during the war, gave me her blessing, or I never could have done it. So there's a lot of family dynamics, past and present, floating around this.
And there's a lot of insight from your sister that was born during the war, because it was, because Norma had to try to keep her family together. I don't know if she worked outside the home, but she probably relied on the checks, on the money coming from your dad, and trying to keep you guys clothed and fed and in school. It's really difficult.
Oh, yeah, and she had to manage the finances. She had to worry about who was living or renting or not living in the house back in Bangor. She sent stuff to Wilber all through the, he'd write home. He needs, he liked canned oysters and send cleats for my shoes. The Army doesn't give them to us.
Oh, my.
So he says, when I'm going through the jungle, I get a big advantage. If I hop on a tree root, my feet stick like a cat with the cleats you sent, and foodstuffs and a wristwatch or a new wristwatch. She's just sending stuff all the time and dealing. And then she had to deal with her own pregnancy, and then in the end, she didn't quit. He quit when he killed himself.
Yeah. That's such a
she
shame.
kept going as the dutiful mother, but being extremely religious. She just carried. I think she felt that we would have hated her if we children knew the truth. But we found the truth out through what I did, and that sister grilling her before she died. So she, I think, learned that we didn't hate her even when we knew the truth, which was sort of a plus on the whole story.
Gosh.
But she was obviously, through her whole life,
If Hollywood
exuded guilt.
If Hollywood calls and they make a movie out of this, my prediction is they're going to start with Chapter 2. It was one of the perfect days of my life is the title of the chapter, and I think that's where they're going to start.
Yeah,
I think
that's him remembering the first time he took her out on a picnic. Only a week after he met her. She was a student in one of his classes in Washington State.
Wow, I think that's a good beginning for a movie, isn't it, Robert?
It is. It's a fabulous beginning.
My
I
gosh.
think it's great.
Wilbur's War. What a fascinating and what a personal book you've written here.
It is very.
Hale, thank you for being on the air with us today. So, did you live in Florida when you were a kid? When you were younger?
No, but Dad was at Camp Blanding.
Okay.
Oh, he was.
Okay.
Year. And so I remember going down there as a 10-year-old, or maybe 11, for Christmas, and I was amazed that you could wear shirt sleeves at Christmas Eve. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
By the way, you got to tell your listeners about how to get this thing.
Yes.
Wilberswar.com. Wilberswar.com is my site, but you can also find them on Amazon. There's two versions. There's the trilogy, 3 hardcover volumes, came out last year. What's new this year is the abridged, streamlined, distilled, but it still tells the entire story.
Okay.
Which is what we have.
That's the one we have.
And much less costly. That's the one you have. That's called Wilber's War Abridged.
Okay. If I have a listener who wants the abridged version, that's the one that they sent us. You can call right now, and I'll put your name on it. It'll be waiting for you. The rest of us will have to go buy it. I just went to the website. Wilber, by the way, is Wilber. So Wilber was...
But I bought the domain name with the U in it.
Oh, you did? Okay. Well, that was smart. Well, thank you for being on the air with us. Good luck with the book, and if you're ever in Florida, we would love to meet you.
Great.
Let me take a phone call here and give the book away. Oh, wait, I don't have much time. Go on, you've got the book. Who's this?
Good morning, Larry. Fascinating story. This is Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. You've got the book.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hale,
Hi, Kathy.
Hale, thank you for being on the air with us today.
It's a pleasure, and thanks for giving me the time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We will be right back. This is WOCA Ocala.
ATF and our local investigators feel very strongly that they have identified the section of the building that is the area of origin.
Work on hold because a leaning tower is posing a safety risk for search crews. Dylan Roof, the accused killer in the Charleston church massacre, has changed his mind, asking the judge to let him have his legal team back again.
Roof had successfully convinced the judge to remove the lawyers and allow him to conduct his own defense against the lawyer's recommendation. Roof is facing a death sentence at this federal trial. He's also awaiting